Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak on Citizen Television, and thank you for staying with us. We welcome, of course, your contributions here on the broadcast, and the hashtag on Twitter is Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya, at Ayub Abdikadir, and at Safin_Achieng. Shortly, we'll be getting the sound bites of the nominees for the position of principal secretaries at the respective ministries of Defense and Foreign Affairs, who yesterday appeared before the committee at the National Assembly, and they responded to some of the questions from members of parliament, and the committee chaired by the Belgut member of parliament Nelson Koech as to how they will balance the interests of Kenya vis-a-vis the others and the deployment of the Kenya Defence Forces in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, coming 11 years after Operation Linda Inchi in Somalia to fight militant group Al-Shabaab. Prof, before I get down that soundbite, to just seek clarity, because you mentioned an earlier point on the deployment that is now more or less the umbilical cord of that is General Kiboshi. But in the DRC, there is the largest contingent of UN peacekeepers or mission in the world, the biggest in the world for that matter. Why has it proven hard, and why has it been hard for the UN to stabilize the DRC? And why do you think Kenya can do better than the UN in the stabilization of the Democratic Republic of the Congo?
Somewhere along the line, the UN appears to have lost credibility in the Congo. And any mission of this kind anywhere, the credibility of the peacekeepers is important. Because after that, if one side does not respect it or pay attention to it, it can do what it wants. And then nothing, no progress will be made. So that was the problem with the UN mission. Well intended, but maybe poorly executed. Now, the Kenyan or the East African standby force, there are several standby forces, regional, in Southern Africa, West Africa, and it's said that the East African standby force is the most ready and effective of all those. And so, in fact, this may be said to be the first time that it is being tested as to its readiness and effectiveness. And from what they are saying, the people who are going there are experienced in peacekeeping, not in Congo, but throughout the world. They have been everywhere doing it. So they go there with the blessings of the East African community, of Congo itself, because they are not, and that's why the President Uhuru was saying, we are not coming here to impose there. But this mission appears to her to be two-pronged. There is the diplomatic angle, and that's what Uhuru is leading. Then there is the military angle, and that's what Kiboshi's team is doing, together with the others. Now, the military angle is to engage the fighters. Whether they want to be engaged or not is another matter. And from what I'm hearing from the M23, they say, yes, we can engage. Not talking, but the shooting part. How ready both sides are is another matter. It needs to be watched very carefully. But the diplomatic angle is the one to be pushed so as to make the military angle unnecessary. So both of them should be pushing to find a way. One of the problems with the Nairobi talks, they are not starting, they've started before, is that there seems to be unwillingness on the part of the government of Congo to engage with some of their opponents, especially the M23. And the M23 is the largest and the most troublesome of these militias. There are over 100 militias in Congo. But the big ones are the ones that Dr. Mumu was mentioning. Now, these peace talks may of necessity require that all key players be part of it. So, very unfortunate for President Uhuru. If the M23 are not involved in one way or another, even as if they're engaging militarily in the peace talks, it's going to be difficult. And if it is not possible to engage that way, then I'm just talking to small militias here and there. It's good exercise, but will not bear the fruits that are needed. So there is need to rethink the approach. And maybe for President Uhuru to convince President Tshisekedi that it's worth trying.
Talking
to bring their diplomats on this side and see whether you can do what? Understand somewhere so that they can stop fighting. Because eventually, even if there is military victory in the field, it's still a political thing.
Yeah.
And it has to be done politically by convincing the militias, the M23 and others, and the ADF. I don't know how you can convince the Islamic State.
Yeah.
But I really don't know whether you can. But there is no harm in trying. They defang ADF, defang M23, and the military is only one aspect. There has to be that political engagement or diplomatic engagement for there to be harmony and stability, long-term stability. Let me mention something about the Ethiopia, which
we'll be coming to that.
Get to Ethiopia. But before we get to that, Dr. Mumo, let's just open up what Prof has brought. Let's open it up a little bit.
Yes.
I mean, what could be the dynamics at play, political, economic, or otherwise, especially the Eastern DRC context, that may be hampering the process of achieving stability in that particular region? It has been like the volatility has lasted for several years now. I mean, what could be the issues here?
Yeah, you know, the region right now is dealing with a problem that has had a bit of a history, and some mistakes that have taken place in the past have had to be revisited so that they are ironed out. Right from there were gaps in terms of how even the former colonial powers left those countries. Belgium was not very prepared to hand over independence, and there was a problem at independence in the Congo, and some of those problems were carried forward. Then, of course, by '59, there was a civil war in Rwanda shortly there, '59, and some communities took flight into Uganda. In Burundi, a decade later, in the mid-'70s, also that kind of fighting. And then later, now after the Cold War, you saw the genocide with the end of the Cold War. 1994, the genocide in Rwanda. And that was a major blow to that region. Of course, now there were a lot of rebel groups, including those that helped the late President Laurent Kabila to capture power in 1996-97. And one of them, which morphed into some of these groups you have now, was called Banyamulenge. And FLDR itself was in those regions, again trying to cause an insurgency through the northern part of Rwanda. That district is called Musanze. And each country then had to sort of fight its own battle to ensure that it is safe. And therefore, with time, there was a big ungoverned space in Eastern DRC. And that ungoverned space has left a big void, especially with external actors, not just the countries in the region, but also being a very rich country, wide and with pockets of ungovernability, even mercenaries, people from, what you call private military actors down there. Literally, some of them just looters, and they went down there. You will find all manner of groups there, including groups like that one you've had called a Russian called Wagner. Some of those have been operating in those places.
Private contractors.
Now, yes, private contractors, and some of them are not very good people. So the thing is, now with Kenya's wealth of training, wealth of experience and all this, that injection of an impartial actor and a good moderate leader that is not part of that theater of conflict in the direct sense will ensure three things. There are three things that make the peace to work. We call it the peace, a mix of three, a tripartite peace, actually it's called the peace triangle also, by Doyle and Sambane, is we say, what is the level of international actors' support for the post-conflict peace-building setting? Okay. What is the level of the carrying capacity, or how governable the country is itself, the country in question, and the ferocity of the conflict that was there? Because if the conflict, conflict has a cycle, okay. And when it gets to a point where you sort of plateau and people are able to talk, then the mediator has it easier. Mm-hmm. Now the initiative by, of course, the Commander-in-Chief President Ruto, and with former President Uhuru there and other leaders in the region opening the way, it helps to have the parties to communicate. All right. It makes them to build a good reputation, because trust is the thing. Yeah. And when you lose the trust, then there's a problem. And that's some of the problems that bedeviled the UN mission. All right, MONUSCO. Yes, but the Kenyan injecting now the East Africa standby, kind of East Africa contingent angle of things, is going to help. That kind of hybrid outlook is what we had in one that is called also UNAMID in Darfur. Okay. There was an Africa Union mission there. Then it was it was doubled up with the UN mission, and it worked fantastic in many ways. So this is really promising, so that now the international community, okay, with the region itself taking lead of its own problems, and then of course now enabling the people of Congo to talk, especially where they are seeing there is someone who is not taking sides, and it can bring all these actors to the table. All right. Especially people like M23. Thank you.
And Prof, let's now flip our attention and focus on Ethiopia. Earlier on you said talks are very important, and the neutrality that Dr. Nzau talked about, seen as a partner who is here to help and reconcile, negotiate, and lead the talks, as was the case with the Trump administration before its tenure ended, in engaging talks with the Taliban, and that was mediated by the Qataris in Doha before the withdrawal from Afghanistan in August 2021. And the questions remaining are many. And these questions yesterday came before the Defense Committee of the National Assembly, chaired by Belgut Member of Parliament Nelson Koech, who inquired from the PS nominees in the respective dockets of Foreign Affairs, Dr. Korir Singh Oi, and his counterpart at the Defense, who was nominated by the President Patrick Mariro, who were hard-pressed on the questions as regards the accountability and the Kenya Defense Forces deployment and the foreign policy question that they wanted clear answers on. And here was their response.
Our investment in DRC, in terms of the officers we are sending, that must be seen within the context of Kenya's contribution to stabilize our region. Why stabilize our region? If DRC is aiding, Kenya will be aiding. That is as brief as that. If DRC is aiding, Kenya is aiding.
The reason why we are invested, or the Kenya government is invested in the peace in Ethiopia, DRC, is because we want to expand our market. And so when we expand our market, it will open opportunity for our young people to be able to work directly in those countries.
Getting to, of course, that story on Ethiopia and the Foreign Affairs Principal Secretary nominee, Dr. Korir Singh Oi, they are saying it's a market, it's about, you have talked about the economy, Prof, and this is a country that has been a darling, may I say, the Defense Pact of 1966, the Kenyatta relations with the administration in Addis then, before the Marxist regime, the fall of Mengistu in 1991. Given that this is happening at the time when former President Kenyatta is leading peace talks to reconcile the TPLF and the federal authorities led by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, how key are these talks for Kenya in regards to Ethiopia?
They are key in every way that you can think of. One, as you allude, Kenya and Ethiopia are very good friends. Going back to the old men who knew each other from the 1930s. There was a personal touch to this thing. Jomo Kenyatta and Haile Selassie were very good buddies. And because of that, there was a sentimental value to it. Now, they both faced the threat of expansionism from Somalia. And that threat explains the military understanding of defense, mutual defense. So there is a security angle to this matter, not just the economic, not just the market. Because if you just concentrate on the market and you don't worry about the security, something goes wrong. So the main thing here is security concern, stability, because when there is instability, Kenya suffers, not just by the loss of markets or trade opportunities, because those refugees come to Nairobi. And you see in the neighborhood, whenever there is a problem over there, they all run to Nairobi. And then they come and settle and enjoy themselves. And then when this order is restored, they go back and become big people. So it is in Kenya's interest to ensure that those places are stable so that people, they don't generate refugees who then become a burden to the country, which is a security issue. Now, that being the case, the stability will also grow into enhanced market. So we start having problems in Moyale, and the people can go in and out and do business as they should do business. So it is a multi-pronged issue. It's, of course, the market, there is the security, the problem of refugees, and there is good neighborliness. We also have to be cognizant of some internal dynamics in Ethiopia. There was a time when Abiy had been confused by Afewaki and Foraje, and they had ganged up in a three-way alliance, which appeared to be anti-Kenya, which fizzled out very quickly because of the problems that arose in Ethiopia. Now, for the settlement that was arrived at recently, with the help of Uhuru Kenyatta, one can be said that both sides seem to trust Uhuru, because they know him.
Yeah.
They seem to, because when he got in, a settlement was reached. Prior to that, there was a problem of either the Tigrayans or the federal government in Ethiopia. Do they really trust the mediators that had been appointed? Poor Obasanjo is a good man, but he had a credibility problem. Given what had happened in Nigeria with the issue of Charles Taylor, Nigeria had given guarantees that Taylor would not be harmed, he was safe, and then he was turned over. And so that lingered, and it is Obasanjo who did it. So both sides of this, I wonder, can you really trust this fellow to negotiate something good? Okay. So the presence of Uhuru there came to add some trust.
All right.
And it seemingly worked.
All right. We'll talk about the culmination of that process that recently saw the signing of the cessation of hostilities agreement. We will talk about that and what it means. But before we get to that particular conversation, let's just listen into what the PS for Foreign Affairs, the nominee, Dr. Korir Sing'oei, had to say yesterday in Parliament.
If you see, for example, focus on certain relationships, it's not because there is a change of policy, but rather it's informed by, the macroeconomic situation, and more fundamentally, it's informed by our debt situation that we are trying to come to terms with.
All right, so a lot was coming from Parliament there as the nominees were defending the position Kenya has taken, and also talking about some of the issues that they will be prioritizing going forward as they take over the dockets that they will be in charge of. But earlier, before we went to that particular soundbite, we just want to understand more on the significance of the process, the peace process that has been taking place in Ethiopia. Just the other day, we saw sort of of a historic event after the AU high-level panel led by Nigerian former President Olusegun Obasanjo and also our very own former head of state, President Uhuru Kenyatta, like Prof there says, played a very pivotal role in the achievement that was there. The signing of the cessation of hostilities agreement between the federal government of Ethiopia and the Tigray People's Liberation Front. This is sending a very big message about Africa and its ability to solve its own problems. But what do you read from it, Daktari?
Yes, most important is, of course, the fact that we cannot really overstate that so long as a region is stable, it becomes geopolitically and geostrategically important and useful for the rest of the world. And this Horn of Africa region, especially with Kenya and Ethiopia there and so on. Remember, Kenya is so well geostrategically placed in the region. You can see the new, the growing seaport infrastructure we have in Lamu. Okay. And it's part of a very important development corridor, LAPSET, that is not just about LAPSET up to Ethiopia and so on, but we are talking about that middle section through the interacoustarine, middle ground up to Douala in Cameroon and the Tangier port in Morocco. I mean, it just brings that whole region together. And then there's something interesting about these two countries, Ethiopia and even DRC itself. DRC has got the mighty Congo River and the rainforest around it that the world must protect. It's not just Africa and Kenya. The world must protect. And those rapids that lead into the ocean there, if the potential is tapped, the Grand Inga Dam itself alone will power the continent. Now add that to give and take a situation where Sudan and Egypt, the relations there are normalized, and there is assurance that that dam will be managed, the Grand Renaissance Dam, is managed in a nice way. Because so long as Egypt is convinced that there is a steady flow of the Nile, yes, and there is not any way that would interfere with its flow, that is another big source of energy, not only for Ethiopia, but the region. And so you see the geostrategic, geopolitical importance of Kenya positioning itself in a situation, because Kenya is the sub-regional hegemon. It is the leader. And Ethiopia is a close buddy. And all these countries have a great buy-in in Kenya's diplomacy of conflict management, of trade, peace diplomacy, economic diplomacy. Now, these things go together. Like Professor is saying, there's the diplomatic angle, okay, and there's the military angle. You need to balance. Now, the best way is to get people to talk. Ethiopia was not going well. Mm-hmm. And they had taken some bad advice, like Professor is saying. We had a problem in Mogadishu that was destabilizing the region. But things are going to normalize. We are going to settle these issues because there was bad influence also that led to the maritime issue we had with them. Because we are good neighbors, like President Ruto said, even in his speech in Kampala and his inaugural speech the other day, where he said that we have to reach out to our neighbors. Mm. And that is exactly what President Olusegun Obasanjo and President Uhuru are pointing to. The most critical issue there, okay, is to ensure that for peace agreements to work, I told you, inclusivity. Okay. You have to bring everyone on board. Continuous communication, because that builds reputation and it keeps people talking, because it is all about confidence building and trust building. All right. Then we get the buy-in of the region, everyone to do their end of the bargain, so that other actors in the international system can see that the region is taking lead with its problems or in solving its problems, so that we can have more investments and more resources that will grow the region. And the market is big, the potential is there, And once we have all these, you know, what Professor was saying, realignments, because you feel them reverberate all over. They are just like those they used to call in geography isostatic readjustments. It's like when you have something. So when that stabilizes, the region will be in the right direction, in light with our Agenda 2063.
Thank you. Prof, this is a tweet from about 12 hours ago from the U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken. And he called on the support that Washington will give in the steps taken regionally to facilitate de-escalation. That's what he said, in Eastern DRC, where the Congolese forces are engaged in battle with M23 rebels that are allegedly being supported by Rwanda. Now, in terms of the difference with regards to what's happening in the DRC and in Ethiopia. In Ethiopia, there's no deployment of a regional force, but rather a political crisis to forestall regional instability. However, then amongst the community of nations, with regards to such messaging coming from Washington, a key Kenyan ally, not only in the fight against terror, but also traditionally Nairobi's ally, among the community of nations, and having served at the UN Security Council as a non-permanent member, how does this raise the stakes in terms of the credentials for Kenya among the community of nations as peace envoy and a stabilizing factor?
It's difficult to say. See, the U.S. And Antony Blinken being the spokesman on the diplomatic front is critical in every aspect. Sometimes for good, sometimes not so much for good. What Blinken has said is recognition that something good is happening. And the Africans, the region is taking the right steps, and that the U.S. would help where the help is needed. Not that the U.S. will take over or try to guide to say what should be done. It should help, but not dictate. And it's not just confined to the U.S. Even other players should be willing to help if they are called upon. So the Chinese, the Russians, the British, the French, they should also be willing to help. One of the challenges we have right now is that, in fact, when the discussions were going on about deploying the standby force, is whether those people will help. And there were indications in the European Union that it's not really willing, especially committing anything. So it is a good statement by the US that it might be willing to consider helping if needed. The distinction should be made that giving help does not mean you dictate. And this has been always the challenge. Exactly where is the line between helping and dictating? And it is welcome that the U.S. is willing to be involved in helping, which brings in another issue that we rarely talk about. In Congo, it is not just a Congo regional African issue. It's a global issue, because the people who are doing the mining and looting in that place are really not the Africans. They are those external forces. They're the ones doing it. And from 1960s, when they killed Lumumba, instability in the Congo appears to have been in the interest of some external forces. So it becomes very difficult, even as Uhuru tries to mediate here, until we address those external forces and say, you are doing, can you stop it?
So it isn't going to be a smooth sail?
No, it's not.
So which actually points to the economic dynamics that I was alluding to earlier. I mean, which may suffocate then the goodwill that ought to be there in stabilizing the region, because there is a lot of dynamics at play, political, those who want to have influence over Eastern DRC, over DRC in general, and those who also want to control the resources within that particular region, both from within the country and even from outside.
You're right, because the worth of what lay beneath just the surface in the lithosphere in Congo. $25 trillion US dollars. 25 trillion, just as an estimate, as being a very conservative figure, 25 trillion US dollars of oil, of carbon, of what do you call these
minerals.
Minerals. You got this, natural gas. You got everything down there, cobalt, and very important ores that are used as industrial goods and manufacturing goods, what we call capital goods. So high value. And of course, we cannot run away from the fact that the structure of the international system is such that you have larger powers, more strong, and they have their interests and so on. But like I said, that cog, that ingredient in the recipe is very important. But it's until you clean your house that your neighbors will respect you and the world will respect you. I think President Mzee Kenyatta had used those words. When they see us and how we conduct ourselves, then they will know we mean business. I remember Mzee Kenyatta using those words. They will know we mean business. And therefore, if we are able to get in the driver's seat, we will be able to attract, like now you can see the US is reacting in a positive way, saying that I think there's something here and the Africans can have solutions. And it's not a way to edge out everyone, but to make sure we have a good hybrid mix that would ensure that, because you can't say all the investors go, but let the people who are in charge take charge of their country first, because that is the problem that is with DRC Congo. And African countries are showing the goodwill of ensuring that it gets on its feet so that it stabilizes the region. And that way, we will not have undue interference and what we call undue great power competition. It is also in Somalia and other places because of these oil blocks here. And they're making us to be divided, because when you divide them, you rule them. But if we are together and we engage positively, then gains can be, even if they are not relative, but absolute in a good way. Yeah.
Prof, do you then, before we take the feedback on the Twitter hashtag Daybreak, with regards to the ICJ matter, in which President Kenyatta in October 2021 addressed himself on when he jetted back to the country after addressing the UN Security Council, and then spoke in Wangoro Stadium in the county of Kirinyaga, said matters in regards to our territorial integrity are not up for debate. I mean, during an aspect of neocolonialism here, advanced by other quarters, and then the antagonistic nature of the African countries over resources, and how can that be best addressed through African-mediated process?
Yeah, of course, there is mischief in these things. And Kenyatta was right to say that the waters are not matters of discussion, because it was simple, pure theft or robbery. And it is not Somalia that did it. Let's face it. Somalia is just a proxy in a very big game, which involved the British, the Scandinavians, and they're the ones who did it. Probably told that actually the current president of Somalia was the president at the time. So they're the ones who sponsored this guy. Now go to ICJ and say you want... And what is it that had happened there? There had been no dispute about the border, because it was accepted or understood that the border is what, parallel?
Yes.
No. But then we go back to the election of 2013, and the big power, the interest in there.
Choices have consequences.
Yes. We had Johnny Carson, who used to be my friend.
Used to be?
Well, we don't see each other now, because I know I debated him a few times. And then we had this British guy who had Christian Turner.
Yeah.
He had just come from London supervising the British version of the Arab Spring. So then he comes to London. He comes from there after being knighted. He lands in Nairobi, and he starts saying, unless you do what he wants you to do, you have only essential contacts. Within barely a month or so after he comes in. And then his friend, Johnny Carson, sitting in Washington. Remember, choices have consequences. You don't do what you... Now, the Kenyan people, in their wisdom, whatever that is, decided to go against the advice given by these people. And it appears as if developments in Somalia were part of the consequences that have been promised. The creation of an oil company, Soma, led by a former British chairman of the Conservative Party. Mm-hmm. And the Conservative Party was in charge, was the government, the Cameroon. Okay? And who are members of these things? Some mercenaries, some people from South Africa, some various peoples. And what do? They get contracts. And they are the ones who are paying salaries in Somalia, include the Minister for Trade. And so they said, now they started saying now they were given a contract to explore for oil near the border, near Kenya. And that's when they said, no, wait a minute, I think there is more oil and gas down there. Shall we claim it? How do we claim it? Say, change the border. So now, when they took the case there, Kenya blundered in the first place. I think Uhuru was not properly advised at the time by whoever, because it blundered. Now, but when the matter matured properly, then it got its act together and said, no, we are not part of this thing. And that court is a very funny court, ICJ, somewhere there again. What did it say? It said, well, actually there's no border. But, and then they went on to draw a border which favored
Mogadishu.
Yes. So you look at the whole thing is funny. So when the president said we are not going to agree, you don't recognize that kind of nonsense.
Okay.
It was a proper position, and let it play out. But that's a different. That's what the issue of proxies, countries being used as proxies for external forces, is something that needs to be addressed all the time. Because if it's not addressed, you find yourself in a mess that you don't understand.
Thank you. And interesting. Yeah. Let's now take a look at Dr. I'll come to you.
That's right.
Because we aren't doing this conversation alone here on the broadcast. There are, of course, millions of Kenyans who woke up with us on Daybreak. And here is what you are saying on Twitter. The hashtag is Daybreak at Citizen TV Kenya. Starting off with Bobo Tieno Wino, who says, kudos to President William Ruto for maintaining a good foreign policy and diplomacy, more so for making former President Uhuru Kenyatta to be a peace ambassador and sending the KDF troops to the Democratic Republic of the Congo. It's healthy and it brings stability regionally.
All right, Remy Butia says Kenya's economic engagement with the global economy should remain a priority area as the country works towards economic recovery. The economic pillar is key in the prioritization and execution of Kenya's interests with foreign nations.
Oringe Waswa says, in as much as we care about our neighbors and are very ready to help them stabilize their countries, we must be alive to the fact that our homeland security and safety need an urgent relooking. Charity, he says, begins at home.
Reverend Harrison_KAJ says by President William Ruto sending troops to DRC is a plus our foreign policies and thus earning our trust and capability, the capability of our men and women in uniform. God bless. Thank you, Reverend.
Godi Barasawere says our participation in foreign policy and diplomacy shouldn't at any point disadvantage us in terms of securing our own country. We equally have more serious internal security matters that should be urgently responded to.
At MC_rumors, you say, was the deployment really necessary? Kenya is undergoing an economic crisis. Drought is ravaging our country. I think with the new administration should have focused on food security and improving our ailing economy before diverting the attention to regional problems.
And Reverend again comes back, says, sorry for the affected families in Kasarani. This is in relation to our top story this early morning, and possibly we'll be getting to Seth, who is on standby. The national and county government, he says, must do something as soon as possible to avert more harms prone to these calamities.
At Okelo Mwalimu, you say even though it's within Kenya's rights to seek big brother role within the region, she should not do so after. She should do so after perfecting her internal security. A country that struggles to tame broad daylight robbery, extrajudicial killings and GBV should first focus on eliminating such vices.
And we have Kipingeno Headboy. He says, we appreciate our country's role in the stabilization of the region, but aren't we overdoing this? Why would we pride ourselves with the stability of our neighbors, yet we have insecurity in most parts of the country? A matter that was well addressed by the Interior CS Professor Kithure Kindiki amid a rise and a surge in cases of crime in the county of Nairobi, saying that will be addressed by the security agencies in the country. Prof and Dr. I'll come to in a bit. Let's head live to the scene of the incident where the building collapsed yesterday, the 7-story building in Kasarani. Seth Olale is now live for us. He was camping there since morning. Good morning, Seth, and give us the latest updates as regards to the rescue operations which started as of yesterday.
Well, good afternoon. It's raining here in Kasarani. Seasons defense forces that took over operations, the rescue operations. We're talking about the disaster response battalion unit of the Kenya Defense Forces. What we know is that since at least one person was retrieved alive 8 hours after this particular building came down, there's no other person that has been rescued alive. What we know is that also body of our middle-aged male was also retrieved from the debris. What we've meant to understand from the Kenya Defense Forces, the Disaster Response Unit Battalion, is that they believe that at least 5 other persons, including the foreman, are still trapped in the debris, in the rubble that you can just see right now. Some of the bulldozers here, at least 4 of them, and just one right now being operating. They are hoping that the other 5 persons who are believed to be part of this particular building before it came down at 1:30 a.m. They would be rescued alive. It is their only hope. And right now what we were able to see is that another shift just came in just to replace the other 25-man KDF Disaster Response Battalion unit. Another unit has just arrived and they have quickly now taken over operations here. They've been joined by the Rescue Response Unit from the Kenya Red Cross as well as the St. John's Ambulance. So far, this particular mission also is being interfered with or being being distracted, if you can use that word, by the rain that started pouring very early in the morning. We were here from about 6:30 a.m. and it has been raining, and according to the rescuers here, that a little bit it's slowing down the operation, but nonetheless the sound of this particular bulldozer has still been ongoing. We are hoping that the National Construction Authority will also give the latest update, because they sent an invitation that they will going to address the press at around 7:30 a.m. But so far we've not seen them at the site here, and we hope that they will also give an update in regarding to what is the latest in terms of how long this particular process will take. But so far we have being told by an eyewitness who was here just moments before this building came down that at least 7 to 10 people were believed to be just near or just inside this particular 7-story building that collapsed, including a foreman who had just arrived with his car. So we just here to wait and get any update from the Kenya Defense Forces Disaster Response Battalion, who took over operations here. And we also were curious just to know how long this particular exercise will take, but they tell us as at the moment it could take another 24 hours because of the rainy period that is now currently ongoing here in Kasarani Seasons area. Ayub.
Communication notification given by the National Construction Authority yesterday, and it did communicate that a press conference will be held at Kasarani, where the building collapsed yesterday, 7:30 a.m. We are now 30 minutes past that. Any confirmation of the National Construction Authority officials who have been there with you since morning, and have you cited their presence?
Well, so far I've not cited any of senior officials or any officials from the National Construction Authority. I talked to one Vincent, who is a communication manager at the authority, and did say that there is a team, there is a senior management team that will be deployed here anytime soon. But right now, as you can see, it's really now pouring down very heavily, and maybe this is just maybe the time just to hand over to you, Ayu, because the rain has increased, and like I said, it is this kind of the weather condition that is also slowing operations here, the rescue operations here at Seasons area in Kasarani. Ayub.
Thank you, Seth, and much appreciated for the assessment he has given us from the incident where it all happened.
Yeah, thank you, Seth, for that. Of course, the rescue operation is ongoing, like he has told us there, and the rains are really affecting how fast this process ought to be concluded. But from what you're getting from Seth there is that 5 people are still feared trapped under the rubble at the collapsed building in Kasarani, right here in Kenya's capital, Nairobi. We'll be crossing over back to him. Looks like it's going to be a long day, even a long night, before this exercise is concluded. But in studio, we have been talking about other matters that touch on regional peace and security. And we're just about to conclude our conversation this morning. But I'd like, as part of your final remarks, gentlemen, there was a concern that was raised that we are stretching a helping hand, yet we are not dealing with our internal problems. We've seen what has been reported across the news, especially the past few days. There's cases of insecurity on the rise across the country. What are your thoughts on how we have dealt with that?
Yeah, one thing is that we should not overstate some of these issues and sort of blow the picture too broad, because generally the country is stable. The country has transitioned very well from the last election, and even in the last election of 2017-2018, immediately after the election, there were muggings here in Nairobi, and there was a spike in crime. Sometimes it happens because, a lot of youths were with politicians and all this, and now there's a lull. And then, of course, the economic hardships, the drought and all these issues, of course, a bit of the post-COVID thing and all this. So all that is affecting the country, but we should be able, we have stable institutions. And I trust what Professor Kindiki said, and I trust that our president and our security agencies are fully in control. We should not come to studio and say things that can jeopardize security operations. And therefore, I don't want to talk much about it, but I can promise you it is going to be stabilized, and these things are going to go down. One thing, as we talk about what our international responsibilities are, if our defense and security architecture flinches just for a minute, that is when you will know that there are a lot of external things that can literally paralyze our country, including attacks from Shabab and other terror groups and international criminals. They are all over cyber criminals and all this. So the things we are doing out there are part of our international responsibility. If we renege on it, if we slumber on it, we will suffer. Now look at what KDF is doing right now. There is a response brigade on the ground. As we are talking, there is a regional mission leaders course taking place at the International Peace Support Training Center, KDF,
Thank you.
All these are important things that we must do at home.
Thank you.
So that we secure our region and our country, and it's going to work out.
All right, thank you. Prof, your final remarks?
Okay, thank you. I think it's good. The citizens are raising questions, and they should continue raising questions.
Correct.
As regards to the internal security and our obligations outside. We do have different arms that look into it. We have the police force, and the police force are capable of handling this thing. So it's not a thing that is saying that you have neglected the home. No, it's not. Obligations outside the country is part of the security architecture. Kenya cannot survive as Kenya in isolation. And that's why, in fact, problems outside there end up being problems in here. So we stop them out there as we deal with small issues here.
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you so much.
But Kenya is safe. Don't worry.
We shouldn't worry. I love the optimism as we wind up the program. Thank you, gentlemen, for creating time for us. Dr. Mumo Nzau, a security and statecraft advisor. We were also having a sit down with Professor Macharia Munene. He is a foreign policy analyst. Asante sana once again.
Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Safina Chieng Oma. Also, always a pleasure doing this for you. Really appreciate your time this morning.
And thank you so much for waking up with us here on the broadcast. All the time appreciated. Many thanks for your feedback, of course, sampled. And to those that we did not, then time wouldn't allow us. It is Money on TV. I see Willis is around. He will be talking diabetic here, but apparently his dress code says a lot. It must have been.
You have to wait and see, by the way. Stand by for that. Willis Raburu coming up next. Daybreak continues.
Good morning.